Councilor Riker at the moment. Everyone else is present. First up on the agenda is an update from the Illinois Valley Can Do. Hello, welcome.
Good morning. Okay. Hi, everybody. Well, this is kind of a somewhat delayed or long time in coming update and report on the contributions of grants passed to the revolving loan fund. And so introductions, my name is Kenny Hauk. I am the Executive Director for the Illinois Valley Community Development Organization, IVCDO, and the easiest way to say it is IV Can Do. We've tested it now in several groups. It's one less syllable and it fits in the mouth better. And it actually relates to how we operate as a community and economic development nonprofit. I've lived in the Illinois Valley and Josephine County for a little over 35 years now. And have worn many hats. We go back to, well, we'll get into all that. There'll be time, and there's plenty of room and time for you to ask questions, of course. So, 2017 was when the City Council agreed to commit up to $200,000 to support the revolving loan fund that we started in the year 2000 with a combination of USDA grants and also additional funds that came in from Josephine County. So the role of this loan fund is for those small business startups and expansions that often can't even come close to finding any kind of conventional financing support. Working with the Small Business Development Center from Road Community College, starting in 2008, we opened up the Illinois Valley Business Entrepreneurial Center at the Kirby campus and have worked together ever since. They are an integral part of how we operate the loan fund, how we take in applications and curate them for their success. Let's see. First, let me give a little more background about IV Can Do. Way back in 1995, those original, the enterprise zones were the urban version, the enterprise communities were the rural version. There were 36 in that original rollout, and I'm happy or proud to say that we are the one organization of those 36 still in existence across the country. Originally, Josephine County had an application that combined the Illinois Valley, Wolf Creek, and Sunny Valley as two separate pockets that qualified for that assistance. You know, back in the day, everything was just economic development every day, all the time. What was beginning apparent then and has become even more clear is that economic development doesn't really stick without the community development component. Whether that's health and education, the arts, community capacity, your nonprofit communities. That's what it takes to make our dollars in business and economic development really stick over time. And even though we're in the Illinois Valley, we have a much larger footprint, or if you want to get something done in your neighborhood, you better be able to talk to the next neighborhood over, the county, the city, the region, the state, and so on, up the ladder. We take a very, very broad brush approach to community development. Like I say, economic development isn't just business advising, financing, the usual services that SBDC specializes in, but also a lot of other on-the-ground things that we see. Having only the two cities in Josephine County leaves a lot of territory and a lot of neighborhoods without kind of access to some of the things that everyone in Grants Pass kind of takes for granted. We have these 7 main program areas. It's not like we do all of these every day, all the time, every year. But if we want to look at infrastructure, for example, Ivy Can Do was the project manager for the $3.2 million Kirby Water District that combined CDBG grants and USDA loan and grant guarantees, working with Rosemary Paget as the finance director for Josephine County. You know, part of these project initiatives mean that, you know, we participate in the CEDC, the Collaborative Economic Development Committee. It was formed between Josephine County and Grants Pass. So worked with Susan Searider in that capacity for quite a while. She also is part of the SBDC Advisory Council. Forests and watersheds, obviously. We've had several initiatives working with the county and ODF, BLM, Forest Service, and private landowners to do fuels reduction for the last 8 years. Parks and Recreation, we were kind of spearheaded the making sure that the Illinois River Forks State Park did not get closed back in 08, 09. Here's a quick look at, this is back at the end of February, which then, it's a good thing we've had some activity since then, but this shows, starting back at the end of 2017, first series of loans and how that has played out year by year since then. Now the amazing thing is that in April, we actually had 3 loans come up. We were able to finance 2 of those loans out of the revolved money from those prior years. Normally what we do is we've been making these loans and then we basically invoice and have the money sent over after we've already, to reimburse us for making the loan amount. The whole loan package structure, you know, the applications come in, reviewed with SBDC, make sure the business plan numbers are right. We work on collateral. Again, our loan program, we do not attach it to real estate. So vehicles, equipment, which is why the cap is only $25,000, because it gets pretty difficult sometimes to come up with enough security and collateral above that if you're not going to use real estate. We have been at between 5.6 and 5.8% interest, fixed interest, for the last 3 years. A 1% origination fee and $75 depending on how many vehicles may be involved in the UCC filings. Our biggest thing is we make it as difficult as possible for anybody to ever fail paying their loans back, which is why our loan program has been successful since 2000. There were a lot of microloan funds started in the late 90s and 2000s. Almost all of them crashed and burned, either because they had too many defaults or had to keep continuing to raise fees and interest rates to where you're at 9.9, 12%. You might as well use your credit card. Our default rate has been under 3%, which has affected less than 2.5% of the actual fund itself. So, which are actually better stats than most of the banks, I think. But it's because of the kind of hands-on approach that from intake and working on and developing the application to make sure it's successful and has legs and have the tires kicked and all the what-ifs and worst-case scenarios. And then, like I say, we can restructure a loan. Oh, you're going to be late? You call us up? Thank you. No late fees. Okay. oh, somebody broke into your place. One of your employees is now taking care of their parents. Okay, we can adjust those payments. A lot of businesses, of course, are very seasonal with their incomes. We can structure payments that relate and reflect the rise and fall throughout the course of a year. This is also to make sure, the whole goal is to get success so that the business is successful and we maintain the functionality and nest egg of the fund itself as a community lender. Here's some nice news from April. Those 3 loan amounts were all done. And like I said, it's only taken $160,000 of Grants Pass City funds to turn into $210,000 of loans at this point. Got 2 new applications. One's a small one, a little over $3,000. Another one's up there at that $25,000 mark that are pending this month. Now, that's got us up to that original $200,000 that was committed in 2017, where we've hit the $160,000 level of drawing that down. Obviously, we can fulfill a few more loans, but I'll tell you that there's a lot of pent-up energy and business activity that's getting ready to pop now as the kind of recovery rebound and the restrictions are coming off. So there may be a time in the near future where the decision will be whether you want to add some more money in order to help us meet the need for downtown businesses or businesses within the city limits. I could talk on and on, I'm sure, but you know, maybe you have some questions now or some things, and of course my good friend Mr. King over here.
First off, Kenny, I honor you for your work. Your integrity speaks volumes for not only the community but yourself individually. So thank you for what you do. I have some questions on the definition of your table.
Yes.
So the third column over, the loan amount, is that the amount available or is that the money actually loaned out?
That was the money actually loaned out.
Okay, and so of the money actually loaned out versus the money available, is that equal then? Did we give out everything that we had available?
No.
No? How much did we have in reserve then?
Like to date, in broad numbers, we've drawn down 160 of the 200,000 that was originally earmarked.
So so of the original that we don't have yet invested in the community, it's about 40,000?
That's right.
Okay. What do we need to do to invest that in an appropriate manner, you know, and I applaud your efforts in terms of your low default rate, but to get this money working in the community, that other 40,000?
Well,
do we need to beat the drums? What do we need to do?
We could be more aggressive in terms of promotion and outreach. If anything, maybe this is, you know, look at this as the kind of a pilot project when it was started. Again, this was the very first time the city of Grants Pass would ever, you know, invest and work jointly with the county and with a local nonprofit community development organization. I think if we look back at the holidays with that last flush of money of the CARES, you know, the city council joined in with the county commissioners, you know, between December 22nd and December 31st, we took in 191 applications, approved 161, and got $275,000 out the door in that week and a half. Now, we all did good work, but to me, the takeaway and the outstanding feature was this was really one of the first times that I know of that you had the city and the county work that closely together on an economic development effort. And the cards and letters and emails I've received, it was not a lot of money. I mean, this was not to make anybody whole for the whole year. I mean, these were amounts of $1,500 to a sole proprietor, $2,000 for up to 5 employees, and 2,500 up to 10 employees. But that's the amount that allows a business to keep in the game to get through the fourth quarter of 2020 and into 2021. And so, to your question, I will take that as an encouragement to get more. But as you see right now, we've got here almost 30,000 on the docket for this month, and I do expect more. And so we'll go through that 40,000, I'm sure, in the next couple of months. And at that point, then there'll be a reconsideration, because I don't know there'll be enough in there to revolve again. We might be able to fund one more out of the revolved money, but it might be time to decide whether you want to increase the ceiling amount that you're willing to invest over time just to support the city businesses.
And again, Kenny, I honor you for your efforts. Thank you very much. Your efforts are appreciated.
Now you're going to make me blush, Joel.
Yeah, that's a good thing.
Do we have other questions? Valerie?
And I'm going to echo what he said as well, because being one left out of all of those that were developed speaks highly for what you've done and how you've helped the businesses and made sure that they had a sound base before you just handed out the money. So that speaks highly for what you do. So I'm just asking, you know, these loans and the loans that we have here, GP, are these loans for businesses within our city, downtown? I'm just curious as to, you know, if you have a different set of information for county or
No, this is
Valley.
strictly, this is, because out of the loan program since 2000, we've done 145 or 146 loans for almost 1.9 million total.
Okay.
Of these businesses that are all in the city limits in town,
Okay.
We've got a carpet cleaning, you've got a food truck, you've got a couple of restaurants, videography, tap house, retail, and personal health and manufacturing. Really covers the full range of business sectors.
Okay. Okay, thank you. That's what I was looking for, is that this is Grants Pass and it has been utilized in
I mean,
various...
we have a lot that are right in the downtown corridor, of course, and then some that are, you know, but these are all strictly within the city limits. And we cover the entire county with the rest of the loan funds. We also have actually a small amount, 45,000, that's available to loan in Jackson County.
Okay.
We would like to expand that as well, because small business needs don't stop wherever that arbitrary county line is.
Yeah, I agree. All right, and once again, thank you for what you do.
Any other questions? All right, thanks for coming today.
Hey, I
Thanks
really
for the update,
appreciate your
Kenny.
time. Thanks so much.
Good to learn more about what you've been doing out there. Next up, we have a discussion about the food truck alcohol and fencing restrictions.
Good morning, Council, Mayor. Brad Clark with Community Development. So the goal today, as I understand it, is to kind of give you an overview of what our current municipal code says regarding food trucks, and specifically how alcohol and fencing relate to food trucks. I think this came up on your agenda in March as something that you wanted to learn more about. So that's the subject and summary today, is that overview of what those codes are, and the relationship to your council goals is to facilitate sustainable and manageable growth. So the development code actually doesn't speak to food trucks, food truck courts at all. So we can just kind of set that aside. Everything that the city currently has related to food trucks is in the municipal code. I think one of the reasons I wanted to point that out is that we've talked a lot recently about amendments to codes, and the development code has a completely different set of criteria for how you amend it. That's a much more involved process, has to go through the Planning Commission, things like that. The municipal code amendments don't have that same requirement, so I wanted to point that out. Under the Muni Code, everything really on food trucks falls under Chapter 4, which is taxation and licenses. And the purpose statement for that whole chapter is to provide guidance and regulation for the orderly operation of those rules, which are commonly referred to as temporary or itinerant. So this chapter has covers everything from ice cream trucks to, you know, other types of mobile vendors. The carts, the push carts, they're treated differently than food trucks. So there's actually a lot under your municipal code, Chapter 4. My understanding is we're just focused on the food trucks today. So the definition of a mobile food truck in Section 4 is it's a motorized vehicle operated by an operator standing on or within the frame of the vehicle, either on the public rights-of-way between the curbs in a designated on-street mobile vending delivery zone for the sale or delivery of food served ready to eat. And then the mobile vending delivery zone, this is basically some areas that are public rights-of-way between the curb lines, and we only have 4 of those that are designated in the city. So if you want to operate a food truck and you want to be in the right-of-way, there's only these specific areas that you can do that. Now that's different than on private property. If you want to operate your food truck on private property, then that's fine as well, but you just have to go through the process, you know, get the permit, get the owner's signature, things like that. A couple of other pieces related to just the individual food trucks. We'll talk about the food truck courts in a minute, but all of them require a license to be obtained. The application to get that food truck license has a number of things in it. The 5 bullets that are up here on the screen are just kind of a few of the main ones. They do have to have a scaled site plan drawn out showing exactly where it's going to be placed. Describing the business and the goods. We do require a background check, so there has to be some personal information there. They do have to have a certificate of liability insurance naming the city as insured. And of course a motor vehicles license. Those are some of the items in the application that get reviewed. I just wanted to stick in, I don't think this was in your Friday packet, but this is just a copy of the application that somebody who wants to operate a food truck in the city limits can get. They can just come in and get a copy of this application at Community Development. It just kind of guides them through what the requirements are and what the steps are. So related to the rights-of-way, as I mentioned, we have 4 of them that if you want to operate a food truck in the rights-of-way, that's Mill Street, E Street, F Street, and Ramsey, and then those are the 4 rights-of-way. And then, of course, the growers market is included in there as well. And there's certain segments of those rights-of-way that are called out. I'm just kind of putting the main street names. So related to your question about alcohol, it is pretty explicit in Section 70A9 that prohibits the sale of alcoholic beverages except when licensed by a special event permit or a community event license. So those are actually permits that go through admin, through the city manager's office, and not through community development. So if someone, and for the most part, the council is going to see in terms of like a new special event, if it's related to public property and somebody wants to serve alcohol, you're gonna see that. It allows vending of non-alcoholic beverages, and then the food truck courts also is specific to non-alcoholic beverages there in Section 100. So this is just a clip of Section 100C4 in the Muni Code under Chapter 4, and I wanted to put it up there because this is the only portion that talks about fencing. Subsection E The second sentence there, the city may grant an exception for overnight storage of mobile food vehicles on private property if the site is secured by lockable perimeter fencing and contains security lighting. That actually was a change that just happened last year. So that reference to fencing, it only applies to the food courts. It doesn't apply to the single ones, and it does, like it says, requires the lockable fencing if you're going to keep them on the same property overnight. If you're going to have a food court where they're coming and going every day, then the fencing is not required. And then there's a number of other, provisions there related to food truck courts. So that's really what the municipal code has to say about food trucks and alcohol and fencing. So we do have Kimberly Gasperson with us. She's in finance, and she was involved in when the writing of this Muni Code section came into play a few years ago, and maybe can help out if there's any background questions. So generally speaking, these, for any other alcohol permits, they come through OLCC. OLCC requires public safety to sign off on those permits. They review them over there. There's then they come back, and then the community development typically issues those. All of them have to have business tax licenses as well. So that's another role that finance plays in the whole permitting process, is the business tax license has to be obtained if you're going to operate these.
I have a quick question about the locations for the mobile vending zones, Mill Street, E Street, F Street. Does anybody know why those particular locations are chosen?
I actually don't have the background. Maybe Kimberly does?
So part of that conversation happened when all of this came into play. We had mobile vendors downtown. And when the council at the time had a conversation with downtown businesses and some other local eateries about the mobile vendors being downtown, this is what council decided where those mobile vending zones should be. And they're very close to industrial zones and the hospital. So that's how those came into play.
Okay, thank you. Brian, did you have a question?
Yeah, I've got a couple. The first one is, I'm not totally sure why we are getting a presentation on this. Is there like a reason that this is brought before us?
Thank
know,
you,
Aaron, do
Councilor.
you-
I think DJ asked for it.
Yeah, I asked specifically for a rundown on regulations for food, in particular having exception against the fencing requirement in Section E and prohibition of alcohol sales.
Other question? No? Does anybody else have questions? Valerie?
Yeah, just in watching the evolution in our town of food trucks, I'm assuming, because there was a council, I think about that time, also made it okay for, I guess, private, because that's where that on K Street, I think it is at one time there was numerous food trucks located there on K Street. So was that kind of just that that private person who owned that lot allowed that to be? And I was just looking at the code that there has to be a restroom available too. So I'm assuming that somebody who was in that area provided the restroom for those carts?
So you're talking about K Street, Mr. Brudke's property. He did a site plan review at the time. So right after this was put into place by the city council, he came back and did a site plan review to allow, I think he can have up to 6 vendors in that parking lot. And they have access to, I believe it's the restrooms like in the Purple Parrot, which I think he owns as well. So all of that was done through community development and a site plan review. Those particular trucks only need a business tax. They don't go through this code at all because those are allowed to operate like brick and mortar businesses right there. They just can't stay there overnight.
Okay, so that was my next question. overnight. Thank you.
Brian?
So DJ, are we thinking we might want to consider a change on this, or I'm just trying to get a little bit more here?
Yeah, once we get to that discussion portion, I have a couple things to say about it.
Any questions? Joel?
So Kimberly, have you been in touch with any of the businesses as to what changes they would like to see made that would enhance their business as well, including those that aren't in the vending business that might want to get into it, given where we're at and what's happening?
I haven't had those specific conversations. We do have quite a few mobile vending people coming in of late. We've seen several people come in and be interested in that conversation, and we've sent them upstairs, given them the maps, had the conversations about where they can operate. And I will send them down to the property on K Street to go down and talk to that property owner if they want to set up more permanent. And then there are some spots available, I think, uptown where the Weekend Brewing was allowed to have, I think, one more mobile
Washington
vendor
Street?
up on Washington.
Washington Boulevard?
Yeah.
So then, do you have a feel for the demand versus the supply of sites?
No, I don't really.
So are we, how close to capacity are we?
There aren't that many mobile vendors on the streets. I think there's only one or two
Okay, so
currently
we have a
active.
lot of surplus capacity at this point from what your intuition tells us.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Vanessa?
Under section 4.08.042, it says that personal information is required to conduct a background check for an application. Can you touch on the reasoning for that? It seems kind of invasive.
So that was put into place by public safety at the time. They get a driver's license and they run a criminal history background check on those individuals. And that piece, and I'd have to look at the whole code. So part of this code exists for not only mobile vendors, but for door-to-door sales and that kind of things. And that's what they go over to public safety, copy of their driver's license. They have to have a valid Oregon driver's license, and they have to go through a background check to make sure they have a clear criminal history.
Thank you.
Brian?
Just following on that, do we know what that threshold is? If they do a background check, like is there some level of offense that gets their permit denied? And if so, what is that level?
I've never had one denied, but he probably has the answer.
We'd certainly be looking at person crimes, cases against kids, sex offenses, things like that. And she's correct, I have not denied one yet.
Thank you.
Any other questions? All right, thanks, Brad.
Thank you.
Sounds like we wanted to have some discussion about this, and I will have DJ get that started.
Sure. I've taken a particular interest in looking into food trucks and trying to find out what barriers are in place, et cetera. We had agreed as a council to allow, on a pilot basis, for example, food trucks in Riverside Park. And that happened, and it was relatively popular. COVID happened, and we haven't really been able to do that. So that's why it's been quiet, I guess, recently. And then so when we had looked at these codes, a couple of codes that came out to me to be particularly onerous, starting with the fencing that would be required on private property if a food truck was to be there past 11, seemed unnecessarily restrictive. It's kind of forcing security fencing for somebody's business on private property with security lighting. I think that should be entirely up to the proprietor of that business. And then as far as alcoholic beverages, going to go back to OLCC, if they can get through the process and get permission to sell alcohol, I believe at the very least that should be allowed on private property as well. Extrapolating into that, at least, using Riverside Park as an example, I don't think that they should be selling alcohol on Riverside Park, or maybe even public lands for that matter. But I think that in the matter of operating a business on private property, I think that sale of alcohol should be permitted, and they should not be required by the city to exercise security measures.
Other thoughts? Brian?
Yeah, I'm just trying to wrap my head around this. I think on the fencing, it's a no-brainer. That makes sense to me. I feel like the alcohol one might get a little bit more complicated. I'm just trying to think of a use scenario, like what if the vendor is exclusively alcohol, and what if they're like parked in a right-of-way or something? Like, would that be okay? I don't know, but just something to think about.
Sure, no, that brings up a good point. I actually didn't think about that. What if we had a food truck that only wanted to sell alcohol? Talking about those specifics, I think, would be appropriate, because the spirit of this is get a piece of pizza and a beer on private property, not necessarily a hard pouring, moving establishment, if you will.
Other comments? Brian?
So I haven't directly been involved in the discussion, but I know that there was an applicant that wanted to put in a food truck. I don't know what it's called. Yeah, a pod up there at the north end of town. And from what I understand, they ran into some difficulties with getting that done. And I don't know if that has to do with these specific things or if that's totally separate. Do you have any info on that?
I'm not privy to that application or what they had difficulty doing. This has really been just an individual pursuit, if you will.
You guys all look like you're very thoughtful, thinking it over. Vanessa?
Yeah, I'll second Councilor Fazer's statement about the fencing. I think that that's not necessary in my opinion. And it's worth revisiting the prohibition of the sale of alcoholic beverages.
Okay, well, what do we want to do with this going forward?
I'm sorry, Vanessa, what did you say in that last statement?
I think it's worth revisiting and examining that prohibition and seeing if it's something that we still want to hold in our code.
Does anybody have suggestions? You want to do another workshop? Valerie?
I think what comes back to me through all of this is that I don't really know what OLCC restrictions are. So I would love to have some information, because I know this not only affects this, but, you know, even our, you know, when we were doing the adult ordinance, you know, when that was brought forth in the beginning, it was also stated that a lot of the things are covered by OLCC regulations, but I have never seen a presentation and I don't really have a full understanding of what OLCC restrictions are. So that kind of would help me if I had a better understanding of what current OLCC regulations are and how that factors in, because if OLCC regulations take care of a lot of this, then I don't think that we need to be redundant in doing the same thing as a city. So that's what I'm unclear about, is how do those tie together?
Brad?
I sympathize with that comment because there's a lot there. I did actually ask the Medford OLCC person, Cheryl, I forgot her name, who we've talked to a few occasions. Would they be willing to, you know, to come and just kind of give an overview? And if that's something you want, they would be willing to come and give you that sort of 30,000 foot view on what they require.
Yeah, I would personally really like that, because it kind of keeps bouncing in a lot of things. And I know when we had that first, you know, that to me, I really wanted to get a feel for that in the beginning. And so I would love to have that. I think that would have a lot of bearing of understanding what OLCC does, what they have rules against, and that would help me understand what I think in a lot of ways we can let go of. Because you're right, if OLCC is regulating it, and I know they're much tougher than they ever were in the past, you know, which is not a bad thing, it's actually a good thing, that if I knew what they were regulating, then I would be willing to step back and say, well, yeah, why are we overstepping our bounds if they're taking care of that? So I would love to have that.
DJ?
Yeah, I could support that. I think that would be beneficial, especially as you mentioned, considering that this is becoming a pretty popular topic of conversation, constantly referring back to their regulations. I think if council understood this better, we'd be able to have a better conversation about that. So that being said, seeing these as kind of two separate items, I'd like to see the fencing regulation go away, and also with perhaps a presentation of LSCC to better understand this, just basically make a statement that we're going to be looking into that, the section prohibiting alcoholic sales. Also considering that the real spirit of this, for me anyway, is private property. I don't want to see food trucks sell alcohol in parks. Right-of-ways, maybe that would be open for discussion or whatnot. But really, I'm talking about a private property operation at this point.
Rob?
Yeah, I would definitely agree with the fencing. You know, during the, getting rid of the fencing, during the presentation, when it was mentioned, in my mind, I couldn't figure out why that would be required, and I also felt that's inappropriate. But I also do look at that, like I agree with DJ, that those are two separate issues. I think the fencing thing we should be able to get rid of that right away. And as far as the alcohol sales, I think a presentation would be appropriate so we understand it better.
Do you still have a comment, Valerie?
Oh, well, I was thinking of what he said. I do believe that now we can have alcohol sales in parks if they go through the special events. Is that correct? Okay, but that's through the special events, and so I'm just making sure I'm clarifying in my mind that that is a special event. Okay, so I don't have any problem with the fencing. I'm not quite sure why that was put there in the first place. I'd love to know what the fencing, why they felt the need for the public fencing in the beginning. That would be my curiosity.
Does staff have any more information on why that? Kimberly, any thoughts? Oh, it was on why the fencing requirement was put into place in the first place for a private food pod?
I think the genesis of that was when the site that is on Morgan and Vine, right across from the little pantry, which I believe used to be RV sales, is something like that. There was some conversation about that site being a food truck court, and at the time it was basically prohibited. That was already fenced. That site already had a fence around it, and the application to amend the code actually did not originate from the city. It originated from the private party who wanted to do that, and since it was already fenced and already had lighting, I think their thinking was, well, the city might sign off on this easier if they knew that there was fencing, security fencing already there in terms of the concern about access to the food trucks overnight. So that's my understanding of how it got on there last year. That application, since it came in with a different applicant who didn't want to change that. They actually did get approval a few months ago. Nothing has occurred, but they did get a permit to proceed.
Rob?
So Brad, the way it is currently, the food trucks are allowed to stay on private property overnight, or they're not allowed?
They are if they're fenced.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Sure.
Yeah,
And then if there's no fencing, they'd have to leave.
correct.
So basically, we would be, I guess, changing one so are we also then asking as a council to allow them overnight then without fencing? Is that what we're saying?
And just to be clear, we're talking about food truck courts right now because there is no fencing requirement related to a single food truck.
So a single food truck on a piece of private property, is that allowed to stay overnight?
For a single, if they have a fence. So we do treat that the same. Yeah,
So only if they have a fence, they'd be allowed to stay overnight?
right.
Yeah, to me, I don't understand why that makes sense either. It would seem like anybody should be able to park overnight on private property.
Okay, well, do we want to break this out into two separate issues and pursue a change in the code regarding fencing and then have another workshop? Or do you need more information about fencing as well? DJ?
I just want further clarification about the procedure of changing these kind of things. If I understood you correctly, Brad, this would not need to go to UAPC, that's correct? Okay. Because if it would have, then I think it'd be messy to throw them portions of the code, but then if it doesn't, then I'd be in support of treating these as entirely separate issues.
Okay, well, council, I guess on the issue of the fencing, how many of you are in support of putting that forward to a business meeting to discuss removing the fencing requirement? Brian, Joel, DJ, Vanessa, Rob, Valerie. All right, we got enough, so we'll pursue that, and then we'll look into getting some more information on alcohol requirements in the OLCC. Okay. Got what you need there, staff, before we move on? Okay. Next up, first quarter work plan update, and the city manager will be presenting.
All right, good afternoon, Mayor, Council. It's my privilege to be able to provide you with an update on the quarterly report for the strategic plan. This is an accumulation of a lot of work on your part to provide policy direction, a lot of work on community members and your advisory committees, and also staff to get us to where we are today. This supports the goal of leadership by providing a working basis for evaluating the achievements of council goals and providing direction for the development of the city budget, which is what the strategic plan does. It's such a key component of where we're going and how we're going to get there. As you're familiar, we start the strategic planning process every year towards the end of each calendar year, where you're gathering information from all your constituents, your advisory committees, yourselves and staff. And we put that together, and you sit down and recognize all of those hopes, wishes, dreams, and goals for the community, prioritize those, come out of that with a strategic plan that you adopt. We would then work on a work plan that provides the real meat to how that's going to get accomplished. And then the resources are then allocated through the budget process, which we happen to be in right now. And you have another budget committee meeting coming up on Thursday. So there's 5 main primary goals within your strategic plan. There is enhanced community safety, provide cooperative shared leadership involving council staff and the community, encourage economic opportunities, facilitate sustainable, manageable growth, maintain, operate, and expand our infrastructure to meet community needs. Those 5 goals are supported by 23 objectives and 104 actions, and we're going to be talking about those goals, objectives, and actions. Your top 5 goals coming out of strategic planning this year was your number 1 was to explore urban renewal agency opportunities for Caveman Plaza. And I think that's going to be something that'll be coming up in your workshop discussion here shortly. Implement housing action plan, public facility management plan, trail development and recreation, and create a city climate task force. So what we'll do is we'll first start with just highlighting a couple of items that we thought would deserve some kudos, some information for you and the public, and then finish with all your 3-star items, whether there's been action or not. That was something council desired to have just an update on, was all of the 3-star items, so we'll also be reviewing those. Under enhanced community safety, objective 1, maintain necessary criminal justice infrastructure. Action 1, pass a public safety levy. Well, tomorrow, I'm hoping everyone is getting out and voting. We'll know the results of that come tomorrow evening. I'll sort of go through and I'll move on to the next one. If there are any questions, feel free to ask, and we can provide any additional information or highlights on those items as we move forward. Again, just another one that we thought was a nice one to add is under enhanced community safety. It is a 1-star item, but utilize technology and social media to produce positive outcomes. and improvements in public safety practices. And there's been a couple of things that we've done this quarter that we just wanted to highlight. Police and Fire Rescue now have department-specific social media platforms, and they're working on better engagement within the community utilizing those platforms. Also, a neat thing is Fire Rescue did launch a Community Connect, and this is a great platform to where the citizens can have a communication and share valuable life-saving safety information with first responders. And so that's sort of a neat program that we're proud to also say that we're initiating to enhance community safety. So,
Aaron, what is the Community Connect?
Chief, you want to come up and...
That's a great question. Community Connect is just another online platform that citizens can jump into. For example, if they have an elderly person in their home that might need some additional assistance, then the crews know as they're responding to the address that this particular address has a flag, and it allows the firefighters basically to know what to expect when they get there. So citizens have the ability to do that on a lot of different categories. They might have certain flammables in their backyard or whatever the case may be, but they might have people with disabilities, etc. So it's just a great platform for the community to use to engage with us.
Under Objective 2, under Provide Proper Shared Leadership involving council staff and the community, we have Develop and Implement Community Communication Strategy. Action 1, Increase citizen awareness of what utility rates cover. So that was something the council was interested in, making sure that we had at least some kind of outreach, some kind of push of information when it came to utility rates. And part of that was specifically due to the number of things that we were doing. Recently, council, a couple of years ago, had increased water and wastewater rates. We also implemented a stormwater utility rate in the past couple of years, and trying to get the word out on why those increases were necessary due to the formation of a new utility or the cost of upgrading our wastewater treatment plant or the cost of developing a new water treatment plant and getting that information out. We've utilized a lot of sources to do that. We've also utilized things like the GP Now. A number of the issues had specific stories associated directly with that. For instance, like the title, The Dollar Value of Water, was able to highlight the importance of water within the community. Under Action 2, increase public awareness of decisions regarding the water treatment plant. This dives down even further, even deeper to just not utility rates, but to water also. Again, it's the biggest project the city has undertaken from a capital perspective, and so making sure that council's decisions and actions that need to be taken also at a staff level are known to the community. Council believed was very important. So we've utilized our media to get the word out on stories relating to the water treatment plant, including neat contests like Jason mentioned, I think at the last city council meeting, the drinking water poster contest, where we had a huge amount of participants, I think a lot more than last year, and looking forward to even more future success with that program. Again, just another one to highlight. There is a one-star item, but Action 3, identify new methods to increase communication and participation with citizens. Citizen followers to city social media accounts. This is just in this last quarter. We've had 186 new followers on Facebook, 195 on Instagram, and 129 new members on Nextdoor. So we continue to gain popularity and interest in some of those social media outreach mechanisms, and so that's a very good positive that we have an opportunity to get more engaged through dissemination of information in those 3 categories. Staff is working on proposals to increase the use of video and animation to make it more interesting and more eye-catching, so people will want to click on that link and take a look at the information that we have to provide. And we're always trying to, in our social media and any kind of promotional campaigns, always trying to promote the opportunity for the public to also access you as a council member or the mayor and city staff, whether it be through your council community connections, the monthly meetings, the radio shows. We're always trying to make sure that the public knows that you are available and willing and able to discuss items of interest with the community. Action 5, partner with school organizations to do more public outreach throughout the city. One thing that we've done for this also is through our water restoration plant. Gary, who is our treatment plant superintendent, has done a great job and has started working with the school to develop vocational opportunities and get students more potentially interested and at least knowledgeable about the options that they have to start a career. There are some great careers. We have so many opportunities for youth to get interested and try to get them involved through our summer training and temporary programs. And this is just another opportunity to where we developed this pathway program for water reclamation and an opportunity for students to become more aware of what they could do in the future as they decide what might be their passion. Okay, so these next slides, which there's quite a few slides here on this one, are all of your 3-star items. And as mentioned, whether there's progress or not, or it's complete or whatever, we'll provide you with some information on what's going on with your 3-star items that are in the strategic plan. Objective 2 is prevention-focused community policing to help reduce crime and build public trust. So our Grants Pass Police has partnered with Options of Southern Oregon and to try to take a look at any kind of a police-assisted addiction and recovery initiatives. The real key to this is that community policing that the chief is focused on and building trust. And our end game is to encourage drug users to pursue recovery options. And that's part of this program that we've done, and that is truly community policing to help reduce crime and public trust. As we know, drug addiction is one of those things that's a foundation to some of the illegal activities that occur in this community. So anything that we can do positively to get people to pursue recovery is key. And so this is a new opportunity and something we're trying to push. Under encourage economic opportunities, Objective 1, facilitate an environment to encourage business prosperity and economic opportunities. Action 1, explore urban renewal agency opportunities for Caveman Plaza. This is one that came up through strategic planning, of course, and a redevelopment profile of the property is being prepared. We will likely be discussing this, I'm thinking, in the future. I think the mayor and council president and I talked about having this on the agenda sometime in the near future if it's not already. So this will be coming to you, and we'll have a discussion on urban renewal agency and the Caveman Plaza and how those things are linked to community. Under the same goal, Action 2, prepare a funding package to resolve sewer development issues at Spalding Park. There is still much to come, and it's forthcoming. You have heard from Jason through either the budget process or through other things that we have an alternative plan to actually putting in a bunch of sewer infrastructure to the cities, but to partner with the private sector to do some small pump stations for wastewater to where we can at least get the sewer taken care of as one of the, which is just one of the deficiencies in the Spalding area to make all the property shovel ready. Under the same goal, enhance commercial district to create quality shopping and dining experiences. Action 1, ornamental lighting on H and 5th Streets and extend to G Street. No action taken this quarter, but we're continuing to work on that. As you know, those are great addition to the community. They're great for pedestrian traffic and just look and feel for our downtown, and we're continuing to look at that development of those ornamental acorn lighting down G Street to, say, Climate City. Action 2, alley activation and beautification. So COPA has selected the artist and approved the renditions. This, I believe, is in your packet, and you'll be taking a look at this. This is the rendition of what the alleyway may look like. This is the one that's sort of next to the hall downtown, and it's going to be these huge Alice in Wonderland type of flowers that you'll be able to walk through, and that's part of the alley beautification project. Under facilitate sustainable manageable growth, encourage an environment which provides for the growth of affordable housing opportunities for a variety of Grants Pass residents' needs. So these next number of slides are going to focus primarily on housing It's a 3-star item, and there's a huge list. So I'll be going through some of these things here that highlight some of the 3-star items for affordable housing. Action 1 is explore different ways that legislation can both encourage and improve the development of housing for all levels of income in the community, including the unhoused. And we have presented options to amend how social service facilities are regulated in the development code. And the UAPC also has a scheduled hearing for July 14th for a formal code text amendment to help with that, which will then be moving forward to council. Action 2, facilitate development of homeless shelter and or urban campground. We've met with a number of community leaders, and we came up with we made some great progress. We are currently in the process of contacting a number of different property owners that have properties that are at least 1 acre in size or larger in business park or industrial, to try to determine if there is a location that we can have for an urban campground, and more will come to you in the near future as we make continued progress on this. Action 3, rezone urban growth boundary areas from rural to urban, and associated with the transportation plan update. So we have a lot of property out there, say Allen Creek is one of those that we've talked about before, might sound familiar to you, that is prime for rezoning and potential housing opportunities. And those could be done immediately right now. Any developer could come in right now and get that rezoned and develop for housing. What we're trying to do is something very unique in the state of Oregon. We're trying to incentivize some of the development by upfront getting rid of the transportation code, the transportation traffic impact analyses that properties have to do. So we've been working hard at that. We've had some hurdles that we've had to deal with ODOT, but we've come to a solution, and we're moving forward with that. Council's provided direction for us to do a little more work from a study perspective to make sure that we can try and get all those properties rezoned, and then create an automatic incentive for those properties to not have to do an impact analysis, which would ultimately save the developers time and money when it comes to developing those currently vacant lands or lands that are underdeveloped. Action 8, lobby the state to allow relaxed building codes for retrofitting upstairs spaces in the downtown buildings and for residential use. We're currently communicating with other planners in the state of Oregon that may have had more success with this and seeing what they've done, so we can learn from their lessons. And research is ongoing to assess potential barriers in our building codes to make that more accessible to property owners. Action 9, aggressively gear up for implementation of House Bill 2001 with an ordinance allowing cottages and cottage clusters. We have hired some consultants to help us through this process, and that contract will be completed July 1st, 2021. We've got hearings ready, code text amendment, which will be complete, and the Housing Advisory Committee subcommittee has held a number of meetings, and UAPC is also has received an update on the proposed changes related to cottage housing development and our compliance with House Bill 2001. As you can see, there's lots of action items here, and we are trying to do what we can on housing. Objective 3 is develop and implement a housing action plan. You've recently heard from the Housing Advisory Committee their top 10, along with a list of all their other items that Council is looking at adopting. Guidelines for the urban renewal funding are being drafted and will be presented to Council second quarter. That will help with potentially incentivizing multi-use affordable housing also. Action 3, conduct a housing needs analysis. This is part of the 3J Consulting and FCS group to complete a housing needs analysis draft. About 2 weeks ago or so, I sent Council some data on that just for your review, because it's going to be coming in front of you. A Council workshop to review is scheduled for May 24th. Action 8 is to prioritize review of building permits for affordable housing. So with that, we've actually completed that. That's a positive. Action 9 is permit manufactured homes outright. Development Code 12.2 permits manufacturing houses in all R zones as administrative permits, and that is complete. Another complete item is Action 10, allow small tiny homes with standards, and that's another item that we've completed. Action 11 is use urban renewal agency to incentivize development of multifamily housing by WinCo. There's some property that could be prime for multifamily or affordable housing. And currently right now we're developing guidelines for the use of urban renewal dollars to help fund affordable housing. That's something that the City Council did make a plan amendment to the urban renewal agency. And now we're developing those guidelines for you, and they'll be in front of you shortly, so you'll take a look at that, and that'll be another tool, not only for building community, and taking a look at blight, but also the development of our housing needs. Action 13, develop minimum density zones. Housing Advisory Committee has forwarded a motion to council to support the establishment of that, and we have started those discussions. Facilitate development of low-income housing. A development agreement is under negotiations with AVS. We've been going back and forth a little bit, but the contract is within AVS's hands. They are currently reviewing that and getting that back to us. The conversations that we've had, that staff has had with AVS, is they are very excited about coming into our community and developing an affordable housing for seniors on that piece of property that is currently owned by the city. So under operate, maintain, expand our infrastructure to meet community needs, objective 1, plan and develop infrastructure. Action 1, public facility management plan. So we now have a new facilities supervisor on staff, and this project has been identified and included in the fiscal year 22 budget. It was discussed a little bit with Jason at the last budget committee meeting, and our actions moving forward if those resources are allocated as such. Action 2, develop landscape amendments focusing on xeriscaping. This is an item that you're well aware of. We've been recently having discussions on that. Council will review final draft amendments at a workshop in the second quarter, and the UAPC, the Urban Area Planning Commission, public hearing is anticipated also for third quarter. Objective 2, ensure water infrastructure needs are met. Build a new water treatment plant. So a lot has happened in this last quarter. A lot of positive has happened. We have finalized the acquisition of the 7.7 acres needed for our new water treatment plant. We have gotten requests for proposals out. You've reviewed some of those for the initial land clearing and site preparation. And we're also working on requests for proposals for a design build team. So that's all a huge amount of work that's been happening, and can't thank you, council, enough for your policy decisions and your strength to continue forward through that whole process, along with staff and our consultants in Stantec for hanging in there and helping out through that process. Yes?
Do we have a theoretical date when the design build team will be reviewing applications?
Their proposals are due to the city on the 24th, I want to say. So we have a team formed, which includes Josephine County Personnel, Public Works Director, as well as staff from Medford Water Commission, city engineer, real diverse group that will then review those. We'll get back together. We hope to have somebody in front of you. We're thinking the second meeting of June, first meeting of July for award.
It's moving. So objective 4, ensure transportation infrastructure needs are met. This is a picture you might be familiar with. We recently had a discussion about restrooms in the downtown area, and council has identified 2 locations for the 3 that we'll ultimately be purchasing. And we are moving forward with that as directed by council. We're also looking at parking lot signs, which should be scheduled for council's consideration in the second quarter of 2021. Action 2, install sidewalks and crosswalks in the intersections of Foundry and Blue Street. That's forthcoming. No action for this quarter. Objective 7, ensure park infrastructure needs are met. Action 1, trail development and recreation. We've been working on a connecting path between Parkside Elementary and Reinhardt Volunteer Park, which will be an excellent addition and goes along with that objective. Action 2, develop a forest stewardship and recreation use plan for Dollar Mountain. So much has been going on with Dollar Mountain, from wildland fuel reduction to actual planning for park trail improvement. But both of those things are progress that we've made in this one quarter, including even some grants that we've applied for and received of $100,000 to help with that becoming a destination marketing facility. Action 3, develop Beacon Hill Park. Staff has met with Rotary to discuss volunteer tree planting along the Interstate 5 frontage. That's something that's been discussed to help beautify that area and get that prepared for some kind of future park development. Restore and replace Caveman Pool. We have had a lot of discussions with that. Council recently provided staff direction to try to open that early for District 7 and their pool program and their recreational program, so we can provide that use for the youth of our community. And we are moving towards that. Technically, I think today was the first day that they were wanting to use the pool, and we've been working with School District 7, and they did agree to pay the city 50% of our costs through that process, which is $450 a day. And we're looking at having an open season this year for the general public also. Action 5, install additional security cameras throughout the park system. We did install one at Riverside Park and Tuesday Park. Those are very valuable tools for us to utilize, and they've served us well. Action 6, identify park infrastructure priorities. So we have a big list of park infrastructure priorities, and we're actually starting to click down the list. One of those items that you've recently discussed and provided direction on is the pickleball tennis courts. That is a maintenance issue, and before we go and just redo exactly what we're doing, it doesn't cost anything more for us to have a discussion on maybe the change of use of some tennis courts to pickleball courts before we do that. And so we've done that. We've been provided the direction by council. We've collected a lot of data, and we're moving forward on knocking those items off the list. Objective 8, enhance opportunities to promote character and community spirit. Create a city climate task force. That's forthcoming. Staff has reached out to some council members that were interested in this topic, and we've gotten some valuable feedback from them to help us frame something for council consideration at a future workshop. And that concludes the report. Again, it's been an honor for me to present this to you. And again, this is an accumulation of the community, of council and staff in order for us to get some of this stuff accomplished.
We've have lots of things going on all the time, right?
Yes.
Rob, question?
Yeah, I just want to make a comment, and thanks for the presentation. On the slide that talked about the vintage lighting for G Street going down to Climate City, at this point, staff might want to look into the possibility of a grant, because in years past, I know CLG had certified local government stuff through SHPO, had grants for that kind of thing that we never qualified for. So there may be free money out there for that project.
That's a good point. We'll have Adam and I can have a discussion with our grant administrator. Having that classification is just another potential door opener. So appreciate that. Yes.
Other questions or comments about the report? Vanessa?
On slide 9, it talks about a couple editions of the GP Now, one being in March and one being in April. I'd like some clarification around that, because I believe March was supposed to be the last issue.
Yeah, it was the last printed issue of GP Now. What we're doing now is we've got just a modified version of that we're creating, and it's just an online version. It's just another opportunity for us to push information to the public besides Facebook paid posts or my weekly report or my monthly report. This is more of a user-friendly opportunity for us to continue to at least push information out to the public.
Thank you.
DJ, did you have something?
Yeah, just briefly about the restrooms. Have we satisfied like the amenities and exact location of those, or are we expecting kind of another meeting about finalizing those? Because with anticipated construction, perhaps summer or fall this year.
Sure, good question.
Just a question.
So we did bring back revised pricing. We'll come back with a final, before we purchase them, with the final, here's what we're purchasing, here's the cost, with the options that you had directed us to get pricing on. The final location we do for the one, which would be in one of the public parking lots over, or right behind the visitor center, and the parking lot, I'm gonna get it wrong, right next to the G Street Bar, the Beaver, thank you.
Okay.
So those are the only two locations. The third was yet to be determined. We're hoping to get one in by late summer, early fall.
Sure. Very good, thank you.
Other questions? Brian? Then Rick?
Yeah, thank you, Aaron. I had a question on slide, 18, which talks about there's a bullet there that says a formal code text amendment has been drafted and a UAPC public hearing is scheduled for July 14th, and I believe that pertains to using other areas for the social services besides business, park, and industrial. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. I'm just wondering why it got scheduled out so far. I mean, that's over 2 months from now, and it seems like they could have maybe scheduled it sooner. So,
So I can have Brad come up and sort of talk about the scheduling process. He'd be better to answer that one.
So we have an intergovernmental agreement between the City of Grants Pass and Josephine County that says that we have to give them 45 days notice before any text amendment at all to the development code. And of course, before we give that 45-day notice, it needs to be done. Like the slide said, it is drafted, but that's really the main reason, is in order to accommodate that requirement. And then to meet, the UAPC meets twice a month. So you have to kind of time it so that you meet one of their two meetings. So that's really the reason.
okay, thank you.
Yeah.
I had a couple others. One of the slides mentioned that manufactured homes are permitted within the city. Is that
In residential zones?
so essentially anywhere? Is that something that came from the state? Is that something that council decided?
It was a state.
Okay. And a lot of the items that Aaron went over today address urban renewal funds, urban renewal projects. And I did see on our agenda, which we're going to get to here shortly, that there's something coming up in a business meeting. And I'm going to ask that maybe we have a discussion about urban renewal before we finalize that for this coming year. Because I don't think council has done that yet. I think we're kind of working off of the old plan still. And I just wanted to follow up with Vanessa's comment about the GP Now. I went back and this kind of fell off my radar, but I went back and I watched the video where council made that decision. And the way council worded that decision at the time was that GP Now was going to be discontinued. It wasn't that GP Now was going to be moved online. So if council wants to revisit that decision to make it online, we should, but the direction given originally was to discontinue it completely. Thank you.
So I'll have to respond to that. I also reviewed the video, and it was in the discussion mentioned that it could go electronically, and the discussion to discontinue GP Now was directly related to budget reduction and the cost of printing, publication, and posting. And so I'd be more than happy to sit down with you in my office and we could talk about that further. But if council would like to discontinue a social media outlet like GP Now electronically, I'd be more than happy to stop doing that. We can have our information officer create another opportunity to try to get the word out to the public.
Sure, and I don't want to argue the validity of whether it's worth having or not, but just to clarify, I believe we made a motion that said to discontinue it. And
it
so
was
anything
associated-
outside of that
It was
motion.
associated with the cost of the printing, publication, and mailings. And I'd be more than happy to sit down and talk to you about it after the meeting if you'd like.
Okay.
Is that your last question, Brian? Okay, Rick?
When the restrooms come back, was that going to include the annual maintenance cost for the restrooms? It's part of the information.
We can try and make sure we include what we anticipate the maintenance cost of those restrooms to be, sure.
Okay, thank you.
Rob?
So on slide 21, I have a particular interest in that one because I've been actually kind of in a background level speaking about that, although publicly, since 2007. And it says staff is actively communicating with planners from other Oregon municipalities, et cetera, research is ongoing. And I'm just wondering, is there anything that can be reported now as far as what's been discovered and what other towns are doing to more successfully remodel and restore their historic buildings? Because it really seems like we've got all those upstairs of the historic buildings that are almost impossible financially to deal with. And I'm just wondering what we're coming up with.
Certainly, I'll refer that question to Brad to come up and respond to.
So we've had a couple of different people that have had those conversations with 2 or 3 other Oregon communities. If you'd like, I can get a memo put together that kind of summarizes what those are. Ken Sandlin in particular, because really the building code is really the crux of what we're talking about, and what that building code requirements are. And so that really gets into a lot of technicalities about elevators and stairs and ADA access, as you know, having researched it for so long. So if we could, I'd rather sort of just get it accurate in terms of a memo.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And Ken Sandlin, and I'm not disparaging him, but his job is kind of to be the no man in a sense. He's going to give us all the reasons that we can't do this kind of thing, but we are actually looking to find also the yes people that have found ways to either be creative or possibly even interpret codes differently than he has.
Sure. Yeah, and I've been somewhat involved. Albany, Oregon, and Pendleton have both had quite a bit of success with their historic districts in getting that second floor. So those are kind of the 2 main communities that we've been involved with. So I will get that into a memo and summarize that.
Other questions? Vanessa?
I second your sentiment, Councillor DeLaGrange, about your concerns on the UAPC deadline, because that social services development code text amendment was referred on April 12th, so that does seem a bit excessive. On slide 28, I'm seeing that there were 2 council workshop presentations for the landscape code amendments, but I'm only seeing one for May 3rd. Can you tell me, I know that's a tough question off the top of your head, do you know when the other one was?
Unless Brad come up and tell me, I wouldn't be able to pull that one up for you at the moment.
I understand.
It was about autumn of last year.
Thank you.
Any other questions? DJ?
Yeah, I was gonna bring up the xeriscaping one. This is something that we have been talking about a long time. Going into final draft on the second quarter UAPC public hearing in third quarter. That's gonna put us a couple years into even just beginning to talk about this landscaping, and I find it originally disappointed with the first presentation. The second presentation was functionally identical to the to the 1st. So there really isn't a whole lot of new information to gather from that second workshop presentation. So I feel that this has been sidelined, if you will, and it's dragging on a lot farther than should have. And I guess the purpose of the statement is to just reiterate how important this is to our development code. And if anything can be done to focus attention on that, I'd greatly appreciate it.
I appreciate those sentiments, Counselor, and I agree. It seems like it's gone on for a long time. I think it likely, without full details of talking with Brad and stuff, it probably was from some degree sidelined because other projects just got up in there. I think that there is clear expectation from the staff level that we're trying to prioritize this and get this out the door. So.
Valerie? I was just going to add, and I remember it was sidelined the first time because when I was in the tree committee, which was a long time ago, I think it was 2015 or 2014, almost 2015, they had it there, much of it established. It went on a hiatus when the stormwater project came through, and that was because all of a sudden it was also being impacted, stormwater is being impacted, and there was a new utility being established. But I'm just saying that has been on the books for a very long time. And like I said, understandably, stormwater came through, and so that kind of mushed it. But yeah, it's been a long haul.
Rob?
Yeah, and I'd just like to add that I know that, actually I'm not going to even assume, but it would seem possibly from developer standpoint, maybe DJ's standpoint, it's kind of financial considerations, but also I'm sure he would agree that we're now probably, 6 or 7 or 8 years further behind from a sustainability viewpoint as well, as far as water conservation and both specifically and with the mentality that would be projected when people start seeing new development with zero-scapes and things like that. So we're not only financially possibly hindering some housing prices or development, but also from a sustainability standpoint, we've basically just wasted the last 6 years on water conservation potential.
Brian?
Yeah, I just wanted to follow up on the requirements for UAPC and those timelines, and you referenced the agreement with the county that there's a 45-day notice for any potential change to the development code. Is that something that we agreed on with the county, or is that something that is required by the state, or how is that 45 days a hard number, or is that something that could be changed?
I think it's an agreement that we have with the county, but Brad, you can maybe provide some additional highlights with that. I don't think there's a certain state requirement for this one.
That's correct. The state's requirement is 30. And that's to what they call PAPA notices. They're DLCD required notices, but those are the 30. So it is 15 extra days that's in the agreement between the city of Grants Pass and Josephine County, and that's just an intergovernmental, it's not a state requirement. So that could be changed by modifying that IGA.
Sure, yeah. I, for one, would be in favor of getting in line with the state and shortening that to 30. Thanks.
Other questions, comments? All right, we made it through the first quarter.
All right,
Thanks,
thank
Aaron.
you, Mayor, Council.
Is this work plan you're not going to go through? That's just for information here today?
Yeah, that was just an informational report.
Okay. All right. I'm just going to note before we do the agenda review, at one point we had planned an executive session today, but it's not happening. So it will happen in a week or so, but just didn't have time to pull it together today. Agenda review. Next meeting is Wednesday. We have a business meeting Wednesday evening. We've added a maternal health month proclamation. That was just something that was overlooked previously. We have a public hearing on a motion to accept the consolidated annual performance and evaluation report for 2020, 2021. A public hearing to consider a property line vacation, a council action item on the parking management contract, council action on alley beautification downtown. We have a consideration of airport funding request. We're going to be discussing the DMO again and having a look at their contract as well as whether or not to pay startup fees. Then we have consent calendar items are a resolution on our own council procedures as well as committee procedures, a resolution to amend the Josephine County Emergency Management Agreement, a resolution to accept an Oregon Tourism Commission Dollar Mountain Trail Grant, and a motion to finally accept those scenic resources findings of fact. Any questions on any of that? Nope. Okay, then you all have a budget committee meeting on Thursday. It's my birthday, I won't be joining you. Valerie?
I do have a question actually on today where it says a Parks Master Plan was to be arranged. I was just curious as to where in the process the Parks Department, the Parks Committee was in and what was pushed out. That was my question.
I believe the Parks Advisory Committee, oh, there you go, Joel, go ahead.
Well, it's a standing agenda item right now on the committee, and over the next couple of months, we'll come up with a product that for council review.
Thank you. So they actually said they weren't ready to review it with us.
We just had our first agenda meeting on it, or committee meeting on it last month, and we'll continue it here, and it's an ongoing standing item, but we want to make sure we get through the whole thing and present a complete package. The committee wants to do that, rather than
piecemeal.
You know, you can go slow to go fast, or you can go fast and redo it. So, so we'd like to go slow to go fast.
Okay, thank you, Joel. Also, just a question on that, and I don't know, did they appoint, are they in the process of getting the task force for Caveman Pool? Has that been completed?
Committee members have been selected by the committee, and our next meeting, we're going to discuss location, and then the meeting after that, we're going to discuss type of pool, and then it should, after that, come to the council.
Okay, thank you.
Well, there'll be a public meeting as well before it comes to council, so you'll get some public feedback from them as well.
Okay, thank you, Joel.
All right, next Monday's workshop, we're going to come back around to housing items with a housing needs analysis and middle housing code update, as well as looking at the affordable housing SDC grant program. And then it looks like we have that executive session slated for next Wednesday, or next Monday rather. Is there anything for that, Rob?
Yeah, on the subject of executive sessions, you know, this past week I just happened to ask 3 different counselors what the executive session was for today, and I got 3 different answers. And quite frankly, and I see no reason that the entire council should not get the maximum amount of information that is possible about what the subject matter will be for an executive session. I mean, there's no way, you know, you could even specifically say there's a real estate transaction being discussed, and you could even name the property. It still would not be tipping our hand as far as how the negotiation went or anything like that, but the council might be prepared to intelligently listen and discuss. So, but typically when you just say executive session, it's usually there's a black hole behind that. We have no idea. And I know that Aaron has consistently said that he feels that any information that goes to one counselor should go to all counselors. So, you know, for him to maybe just discuss something with the council president or the mayor might be in a certain sense appropriate. It also does leave out 7 other counselors. So I feel that the maximum amount of information, I also feel that that information would help the public have a better understanding of what the council does. I feel it's appropriate to have the newspaper have some idea of what the subject matter is, because again, it's not specifically saying anything about the details that would compromise our position if there was a legal issue going on, or if there was real estate transaction, but this just posting with executive session, I feel is very insufficient and very unfulfilling, so to speak. So if there's anybody there that agrees with that, I'd appreciate hearing from you.
Do you have a,
So we don't have a problem making sure that if a last-minute executive session item is placed on the agenda, that we sort of try to give council a general idea of what that is, whether it be property negotiation, maybe with the property address or something along those lines, or litigation associated with whatever the litigation topic is. That seems appropriate to try to make sure that you all get that. They don't happen that often, but when usually executive sessions are a little more known in advance. But so yeah, I think that would be something that we could make sure we just send out to all of council.
And you just qualified it by saying last-minute executive session. Why wouldn't it be all executive sessions?
Well, it would be all executive sessions, but a lot of times we'll be discussing something, and sometimes we'll say, yeah, we want an executive session on this. You all know what it is, because you as a council said, let's have an executive session.
okay, anything else on that topic? Brian?
Yeah, I'll just second Rob's sentiment.
Vanessa?
I would prefer those changes as well.
All right, thank you. Going forward, is there anything that you have questions about further out, or things that you would like to get added on? I guess one thing, we actually are canceling the June 1st workshop. It has minimum density written on here, but we had agreed to not have that. That's the Tuesday following Memorial Day. So we'll have to bump that further down the road. Brian?
Yeah, I see on our June 16th meeting, we have a council action resolution, urban renewal agency budget. I think it would be appropriate for us to have a workshop on that before we approve the budget.
Adam wants to come say something. Oh,
We'll be going over that this Thursday at the Budget Committee meeting, the Urban Renewal Agency and the budget.
Council has no ability to make any changes in that meeting, so I think, I don't know if that's going to be sufficient before the council action at the business meeting.
Yeah, if you'd like to make, of course, council can make whatever changes. The Budget Committee will ultimately make a recommendation. They'll approve, and you'll ultimately adopt. And in between the approval and the adoption, council could also make whatever changes that they'd like. So potentially in between this Thursday and the 16th, council may want to have a discussion on that to where you can have more discussion on it.
And part of what this budget resolution is doing is just appropriating a total amount of capital expenditure. In fact, this year, there's not any specific projects designated with dollars. That can be adjusted at the Urban Renewal Agency's board's discretion all year long. So it's just to approve the dollar amount.
That's a good point. Thank you for bringing that up. That's exactly what it is. You still have the ability as a council or as the Urban Renewal Agency board to appropriate those resources. This is just allocating, hey, $7 million, and then you guys throughout the year can appropriate as you deem fit.
Okay, so this council action doesn't appropriate funds to any specific project. Okay. That said, we do still need to talk about it. We don't necessarily have to do it before then, but I know that we were going to have a workshop on it a month or two ago, and we delayed that. So I would like to see that back on the agenda when we have time.
all right, we will get that back on the agenda, and it is on the back list of items right now. Just things that need to be placed on a future date. Anything else for the good of the order today? We haven't really had an opportunity to discuss masks or no masks, but thank you all for continuing to wear your masks today, and we will be coming up with a a decision shortly. We're just asked right now, HR, to look into the new policy changes and see how that affects, we have a combination of staff and public and of course ourselves, and the regulation dropping the mask requirement, although welcome, adds a little bit of confusion in that some people are vaccinated and some people are not, and how to police all that. So, Brian.
Are we not having any executive session today?
We are not.
Is council going to be discussing the Boatneck agreement at some point?
It's done. Do you want to give us a update, Mark? I think we had an email about that, but.
Yeah, I'm going to try to find the exact version that was signed, but it's very similar to what I had originally proposed. It requires the active clubs agree to indemnify the city in the event of any administrative enforcement action taken due to allegations of not complying with COVID-related rules. The active club also specifically states that it will abide by all COVID rules. And they said they couldn't up the insurance in time, but I was satisfied with the discussion that I had with the active club's attorney, and I hope that the Boatneck event can go forward and hopefully be as close to normal as it has been in the past.
Yeah, the Boatneck issue was not on the executive session today, but yeah, it has been resolved, and the active club at this time is trying to determine how much of the event they can put together at this point, and we're waiting for their announcement.
Sure. I just wasn't sure if, since the contract had been modified and hadn't been, I guess approved again by council, if that was going to happen, and I guess it's not, and that's fine. Thank you.
Yeah, so when I originally talked to council about it, I had advised that it's not really, it doesn't incur spending or anything that would be above managerial authority to assign, so it was really kind of more of an informational thing. So there's no council approval required for this. Thank you.
Anything else? Valerie?
I'm just going to say, if there's anybody out there listening who has not voted, make sure that you vote, because tomorrow is the deadline to get your ballot in to be counted.
Thank you. All right, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Nobody? Vanessa?
I make a motion to adjourn.
Joel with the second. Thank you. All in favor of adjourning?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, we'll see you Wednesday.